Welcome to the Futuring Lab podcast, a space where together we intentionally create the future that we long for. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back on the Futuring Lab podcast. I am Alex Wheeler, your host, and today I have a very special episode again. I have a mission to bring you some people who are creating solutions for a better future, for a future that we want to work and create and move towards. And Jolana Amara is one of them. Jolana is the CEO of the League of Intrapreneurs, and she would be my special guest today. So you will hear a bit more about the League of Intrapreneurs, but I think one thing that stood out for me, on their website, if you look, there is a beautiful quote that is around imagine everyone approaching their daily job not just as work, but as a chance to make a real impact on the world. And having a background in a corporate world and now being an entrepreneur, for me, it feels like almost another way to create an impact, to create a positive impact on the world that I'm so happy that Jolana can talk us through, because I think a lot of you are listening to the podcast will benefit from it and also can share it further. So I've met Jolana, when was it? I think in November last year. I was in a bit of that fork or crossroad where I thought, do I want to bring back my skill set to an organization? All the things that I've learned. So I've looked for something and I found the League of Intrapreneurs that I had never heard of. But then there were all those events coming out, a global entrepreneurship week, and some keywords that for me really struck a chord, like system thinking, regeneration, collaboration, and impact, meaning, all of those things that I would love if our world had more of it inside, especially in the business world. I went to an event and met Jolana and the team, and I have, I think, beyond the level of impact and authenticity that I've heard from these entrepreneurs who are sharing their stories, I felt straight at home. And I think it really shows the openness and the curiosity of the organization, and that is really underpinning as well the mission that it wants to drive. So without any further rumble from me, I would love to welcome Jolana. Welcome, Jolana. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. And if you would like to introduce a bit of you and kind of what led you to the League, obviously what the League is, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for the invitation, for having me here. It's really beautiful to be joining you here in the stream of your conversations. So thank you. I feel very honored to be asked. I mean, I didn't know that you were at this moment in your life when we met at King's College back in November last year. So that's also a nice context for me to hear about your journey. When it comes to my journey to the League of Intrapreneurs and also to my journey to intrapreneurship as a whole, it started now more than 10 years ago now, perhaps 12 years ago, when I went to the Unilever offices for an interview with Collectively, which was an incubator of Unilever at that time. So Unilever was still under Paul Polman's leadership, and Keith Weed, who was the advocate sort of this incubator, he was leading on that incubator basically, and sort of mobilized some Unilever employees to help make it happen. And that is when I came to entrepreneurship, or rather, that is when I came to the idea that large organizations have a huge potential when it comes to systems change and regeneration of our systems. And I remember sitting around a lunch table where it was one of those huge conference tables, and we were all having lunch, and Keith was very passionately speaking about Unilever's journey to more sustainable business models, and hugely inspiring for me at that time, especially. And, I just like his rumbling about we must do business sustainably, otherwise there won't be anything to do business with. He was passionately, almost yelling this across the table.
Wow.
And he was preaching to the choir. We were all sort of, on that. But it was so like, it just embedded into my body. I remember, like, I still feel that moment, in my body. And so that was when I started thinking, oh, wow, like there is an opportunity here. There is something here that is worth exploring from the perspective of the individual who works inside of large organization and who might need support to come up with
Yeah.
ways to bring more sustainable solutions or pathways into their organization. And from the organizational perspective, understanding, I suppose I have, in a way, sort of started to feel some sort of compassion for organizations and start seeing them also as a living ecosystem that is calling for help in a way, or it requires it, if not calling. And so, yeah, that work really started to inspire me, and also um, this fire inside of me was becoming bigger and bigger the more I was learning about large organizational ecosystems and their potential to become truly regenerative. And so when I met Maggie Dupree, who is the co-founder of the League of Intrapreneurs, I was completely struck by her. I remember, like, when she first came to our offices with Collectively, just to explore, because it was clear we were working on similar intersections. And she came to explore, like, what could we perhaps do together. Wow, like, and the way she just so unapologetically called it intrapreneurship, and just there was something in that naming it, that it's not just this, idea of large organizations and CSR and ESGs and whatever, but that, specifically entrepreneurs and the idea of empowering the employee within an organization, to I see it almost like this idea of stepping into community, seeing an organization or the world in which we live through the lens of I like to sort of imagine it as the village, right? Or the community. And so if we were part of a village, like in the olden days, when something needs addressing, we would step in because we
Yeah.
were members of the village. So I see entrepreneurship a bit like that, the idea of empowering the employee to really step into the village, to become a villager. And yeah, I'm a little bit rambling perhaps, but that's kind of what really motivates me here and what kind of led to this, I think now 10-year journey in the League of Entrepreneurs, and eventually stepping in as the steward of the journey, as the CEO or the chief servant of this mission, I suppose. We are helping organizations to step in and be a villager, and we are helping their employees to step in and be the villager in the context of their organizations, but also of the ecosystem that their organization touches. And that is really interesting. I've never spoke about it in this way, actually, until now. But I've been doing a lot of reflection these past few months, and this is kind of coming up for me a lot, sort of like the idea of stepping, like, what does it mean to be citizen? What does it mean to live in this world?
Yeah.
And so, with the work that we do, yeah, it all connects, doesn't it?
Thank you. First, I'm super glad that we're benefiting as well to, from your further reflections and that you've just shared. Um, it's a beautiful way to put it. I think there's so many similarities with a lot of the movements that are happening globally around going away from that mass work, mass uniformization, mass everything to something that feels more relatable to, and it doesn't mean that it needs necessarily to be small, but just I think something that's more coherent, more strongly connected, with more presence. And I would love to ask you a bit more after about what would be those qualities almost to that village and those villagers. But I can really sense where you're talking about of having that community that people are actively part of. And I have a sense, that's either from my coaching, from my clients, or from the people I'm talking to, from the news, that really people are craving that to be able to step in, to have that feeling of belonging and of contribution into something that feels meaningful. So
Yeah,
it's a
thank
lovely way
you.
to put it.
Thank you for that reflection. And it is, isn't it? It's kind of, when we talk about the potential of large organizations, we also are looking at um, the reality on the ground right now, right? And
Mm,
the finite resources, the disconnect in communities, the disconnect in sort of, the global north versus the global south. And so I think that looking at it in this lens can help us also sort of take our own part within it
mm,
and be responsible for that. And in the organizational context, perhaps even more so. And I like the idea of sort of looking at an organization as a living ecosystem
yeah.
and looking at how do we help an organization that is relevant and present now in 2026 to still be relevant and present in 2050.
Mm,
For example, what does it take for an organization to still exist and still profit? Business is made for profit. And I don't think it is inherently bad, to profit, but then to profit from what and how? I think that's where the questions need to sit a little longer and be examined further, and how I feel that entrepreneurship can really solve and secure for the future of their organizations at the same time.
mm. How would you where would that profit then sit in that context of that village that you were mentioning? What would that be?
But I have been it's been my reflection all morning, actually. So maybe that's why I'm bringing it, because I've been thinking about this, because I'm writing some stuff now at the moment. And so um I would like to root in the idea of regeneration, right? So when you see an organizational context, is say an organization has an HQ, or their production line buildings in a particular area. That's very much the village around them as
Mm,
well. Those people or
yeah,
those communities should be part of that village, in
yeah.
my opinion.
Mm,
And so the question is then, how does an organization that may be operating globally support those place-based villages around them, the place-based communities around them? And so perhaps, like, if we break it down as a system, like looking at capitalism and its pillars and how it functions and how it sustains itself, um, I believe it can still sustain itself if it considers those wider ecosystems and not only those stakeholders on top, the shareholders, for example.
mm, yeah. And I would also not even assume, because I've seen a lot of examples that are actually showing that profit goes even more hand in hand with that element of purpose and with that element of inclusion and community, which actually, when we think about it, it makes sense because the more an organization can help develop the communities that it depends on, the more then the communities are going to flourish, and then the more it's going to feed back into the organization.
Yeah.
So it makes total sense that the profit will just almost be a natural output of a relationship that's working in a very harmonious and reciprocal way.
Yes, I love it, and I absolutely. It's the mindset of abundance, right?
Completely.
And I just love that the invitation to perhaps shift the capitalist direction towards the mindset of abundance and shared capital that then generates more abundance.
Yeah, and I love the question that you've raised because it's not about can companies actually improve their profit with creating really relationship and being related to their communities, but it's how that you
Yeah.
ask.
Yes,
Love that you
exactly.
said, how
Exactly.
does an organization support a place-based community around them? And I think that's exactly an amazing question to ask, and then to really build from that as well. I think you will get very different responses.
Absolutely, like a purpose or impact that can and should equal profits as well. Maybe not always, but purpose and profit shouldn't be excluded from each other. It should be complementary, really. Yeah. And sometimes, that is a journey for an organization to make, to try to understand
Completely.
that. And that's where I think the entrepreneur can come in, because the skills of an entrepreneur, in my view, is definitely the ability to see beyond, the ability to sort of bridge different contexts
Mm.
into a larger vision that can be translated into a tangible pathway that, in many cases, can or would equal also to profits in supporting the bottom line.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue back to the core of the League of Entrepreneurs. But I love that little roundabout way because I think it really depicts in a broader context where the leagues sit and also, how is it anchored into into a bigger vision. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you.
Um, so can you tell us a bit more about how does the League of Entrepreneur functions and what supports does it give?
Yeah, so we're non-prof, so registered as a charity in UK and US. So our main sort of mission is advancing the entrepreneurship field in a way.
Okay.
So really that's the main focus, and that means, um, you know, sort of helping both the individuals who are driving innovation and sustainable initiatives from within large organizational context, but also supporting the organizations. And
Mm.
initially, the journey started really with the understanding that there were entrepreneurs inside of large organizations.
Mhm.
These lonely wolves almost who were just sort of working on a side of their desk to push social and sustainable innovations from inside of their organizations. And so we started by sort of answering to that need, to the understanding of their sort of isolation within the organizational context and bringing them into community. And that was, we still focus on that, of course, because many entrepreneurs are still innovating alone and pushing for different initiatives from within their organization in a quite isolated way.
Mm.
Um, but it's not the only focus now because we've sort of moved with the times, because since we've started 14 years ago now, you can see in some organizations, even the job title of an entrepreneur, some organizations are now supporting sort of internal ecosystems for entrepreneurs and creating platforms, with some of whom we are also collaborating and supporting them to develop those infrastructures internally. Our focus is sort of threefold: is the convening of the community, is the building of the capacity, both within the individual but also in the organizational context, and it's enabling action. So an enabling action in what way? So in the organizational context, it could be helping to explore questions like, how do we work with our intrapreneur employees to advance our sustainability agendas, to advance our, ESG strategies. And on the other hand, for the individual, it could be, how do we create conditions for intrapreneurs to scale their work, and also to find ways to start collaborating on initiatives together. So say if entrepreneurs are working on teams that align or can meet at a specific intersection, how do we create conditions for these entrepreneurs to then carry a partnership or collaboration forward, and then perhaps even innovate beyond the boundaries of their own organizations for the benefit of the greater whole. And then there is, of course, sort of the mission of the advancing the entrepreneurship field, as I deepening the understanding of that, of what does that ecosystem look like, what role should entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, what role should entrepreneurs play in the greater context, and so what is the role of entrepreneurship as a whole? Those are the questions that we are exploring, and it's very much like a ever evolving work as well, right? Because we're working with a system that is ever changing, and so yeah, the innovation part on the enabling action, it's really exciting, because in an organizational context, we are currently working with an organization where we are supporting really bringing an enabling environment that helps them deliver on their ESG strategies. And that is, for me, is an incredible step forward in the right direction for entrepreneurship. And at the same time, we are currently, we are preparing for the Entrepreneur Action Fellowship, which is starting in 2 months. And that is all about collaboration and partnerships and scaling of our work on the systems level and at the intersection of climate equity and technology. So really looking at not only the individual collaborations, but also how do these themes interconnect, and looking at the perhaps some of the challenges or tensions that we are seeing in these three areas together, I think sometimes can be missing when these environments are separate. And it just, at least for us, it just makes sense that we would bring these together and look at them as a holistic way as possible, and sort of take in the interconnectedness of these different areas as an advantage, perhaps, that could be explored further.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many questions I have popping in my head to start.
These are good, always good. I hope I can answer them.
I'm sure. I think maybe I'll start with that. I'd love to go back to almost that fellowship that you've mentioned, the enabling action, like the different work that you do. But I think before doing that, I'd love to go back to the entrepreneur. How would you define an entrepreneur? Like, if you were to talk to someone and say, this is a bit the characteristics or some kind of a profile, not to put people in a box, but almost to help people who are listening to think, oh, am I someone who is maybe already doing some type of entrepreneurship, or who could be really benefiting from being more in a formal supportive structure? Maybe let's start that, and then
Mm.
I'll roll it out.
Yeah, maybe that's what we are learning, isn't it? To give me small bite questions so I don't go too far. um, okay, so intrapreneur. Who is an intrapreneur? So in our sort of translation, intrapreneur is an employee on the inside of of an organization, harnessing their assets for the greater good.
Mm.
So essentially coming up with ideas or projects, initiatives that would sort of direct their organizational resources into an impact-driven, purpose-driven initiatives. And that can look many ways. An example, we have Hamza Sarwar, who is a global fellow of the League of Intrapreneurs. He works at Rekid, and his work is really rooted in supporting disadvantaged communities in ways of, supporting with funding and infrastructure through his organization. We have intrapreneurs that are able to sort of come up with ideas around how to solve challenge that their organization might have. So, for example, one of our fellows used to work at Coca-Cola, and they were struggling with their recycling issue in the region, and came up with a collaborative coalition of 10 sort of competitors, local competitors, who solved that issue together as they all had the same problem, right? So that's another example of how an entrepreneur could operate. Another example would be an intrapreneur who works at EssilorLuxottica, Saugata Banerjee. He is driving an initiative called iMitra, which started very humbly, just by understanding the need in rural India for optical care and how difficult it is to get to it in the cities. And people would have to travel for days. It means having sufficient resources to be able to do that as well. And so iMitra initially started as a van that would travel to these rural areas, but that wasn't a sustainable model. And so instead, what Saugata sort of delivered on was an initiative that trains people from the rural areas to be able to deliver on the optical care. And it became a 100 million business all over sort of Southeast Asia and South America. So, yeah, it's an entrepreneur is someone who sort of understands their organizational context and understands the societal need,
Yeah.
and is able to connect those together with also what they themselves care about.
Mm.
And that means an entrepreneur is someone who dares to dream, who dares to question the status quo, and who's able to consider carefully their organizational politics and contexts in a way that enables them to test their ideas, to not just leave their dreams out there in their minds, but actually to form them into concrete ideas that can be tested, prototyped, and then potentially even sponsored and developed into a real initiative driven through the organization.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if I understood well, you have almost like a f- a funnel that comes out. It starts more with an individual, or maybe a few individuals within an organization who see, as you're mentioning, a societal issue, something that needs to be addressed, something that the company can do, and something that's really unique to them that they feel animated to do. And they start creating from an idea a solution, something that could be tested, that can be iterated. And as they do that within the company, then I guess as it goes, as they learn, as they connect further, then it develop, and maybe then, as you were mentioning with the previous examples, really take roots inside the companies.
Yeah, and that's another important trait of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs need to build in relational infrastructure
Mm.
around them, inside and outside of their organization. It's really important because, say, entrepreneur could be on any level. Say
Yeah.
someone in a more junior or more senior, it doesn't matter. But the distinction, how does one succeed, really often it lies in the ability to bring others along on the journey and convince others that this idea, this amazing dream that I might have, um, m- makes sense for the organization and is worth investing in. Investment, I think, doesn't always need to be huge. Like it's good to get things prototyped and tested first. So investments can start really small, and I do know of an example of an entrepreneur who created an amazing initiative, and the initial investment from the organization was £5,000.
Mm.
And that enabled them to test the idea, to go out and visit the different regions that they were sort of working with, and create a proper proposal that then was pitched to the organization and taken on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that gives hope that also it doesn't need to be a really big, well supported straight from the start initiative. It can start small and then grow. Like,
Yeah, like the importance of having, so we call them co-travelers, um,
mm,
around you. Co-travelers, essentially stakeholders that, advocates for your work, those that will help the work, the idea to really be socialized in the organization, so that, yeah, it can be supported, and it is really important. That is one important trait for an entrepreneur, for sure. Because
mm,
you never know who might be an ally, and who might be, um, you know, yeah, who might be the person that will be between your idea being just a dream versus your idea being, a multi-billion dollar business proposition for your organization.
mm. And to like bring it back together with what we shared before, if someone is an entrepreneur or is looking to start an entrepreneur journey, then how does he benefit from the League of Entrepreneur? Is it that he becomes a member, he meets new people? Because you were mentioning this training, it was almost like to bring to life as well for someone who is inside what they
Yeah.
might expect or get as support.
So few ways, right? Because so the league is a community of, in the very inner circle, those who have come through our programs. We call them the League Fellows. We have 250 League Fellows who know the League very well, intimately, because they have been in one of our sort of journeys.
Mm.
And they sit inside of some of the largest institutions around the world. So we have about 52% of people sitting inside of corporates, and then the rest is sort of large nonprofit or public institutions split. And so when we're talking about relational infrastructure, for sure, like being part of the league is a space where, one, you can receive support from peers who have been through the journey or who know your journey very well and are able to support with specific strategies or advice.
Mhm.
Or even, we do a lot of case clinics, which is sort of a tool that can help one really move forward with different challenges that we might, as entrepreneurs, face on our journeys. Um, so community, that's one. Like there's a community, um, and then right now we're hosting the Action Fellowship, right? The Entrepreneur Action Fellowship. That's not just about community or your personal capacity to intrapreneur. It's also about how do we now come up with potential solutions or responses to challenges that we see or observe within the system, and that our organization is already sort of also feeling. And so
Yeah.
the Action Fellowship is really about coming together to reflect on these challenges and see where we can take them together. And we are seeing potential 3 outcomes, right? We can be looking further at narratives and perhaps looking at how do we communicate about certain challenges differently so that they can be understood and the work around them carrying on. And then there is the potential of coming out with completely new initiatives that could be driven forward, or sitting further with those challenges, the
Yeah.
tensions that we are observing in the system. 'Cause sometimes I feel like sometimes we are not ready to answer, to respond to them, but what is required is to just sit with them a little longer. So that's another way that we're seeing potential outcome of this fellowship. So here we are hoping to support those who, specifically those who are looking for that relational infrastructure with the view to tangible outcomes.
Okay.
And then, yes, the last thing that How the League can help is help build the infrastructure inside of the organization for their entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah, which makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's that interconnectedness. If you go back to the living ecosystem that you were mentioning, an ecosystem just on its own doesn't function. It still needs the air, the water, all of the resources that are around. And I can totally see how the environment that the entrepreneur is in, that's either within the company and outside the company with the league, would be then so key in actually like almost realizing that potential that sits within the individual, the entrepreneur, the organization.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Okay. So the fellowship that you are mentioning, it's for it means that someone who will go in there is going to meet people across different companies, across different sectors, across different levels, and basically cross-pollinized on similar challenges that their companies is facing, that they're looking at and trying to find solutions almost outside of their own box together. Is that?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we the focus is on in the nexus of climate equity and tech.
Yeah.
And then that's still very wide, but as long as one sits in there somehow, then we are connecting them together in this large cohort. And the idea is that we meet. It's a 9-month journey with some convenings to begin with online to just sort of frame the entire hypothesis in a way that we are presenting here. And then meeting in Greece for 1 week, where we'll work really more focusing on exploring the challenges, the tensions, and the focus of everyone in the group, and creating conditions for groups to form that will then carry a project together forward, which again, it doesn't have to be project in a sense of a tangible initiative or new product, new service, which yes, that is also potential, but it's very much an emergent space. So we are not directing what it should be, but it could be also a topic that needs to keep being explored, like I shared, or look at how to redefine it perhaps so that work can carry on. And we are partnering with House of Beautiful Business. So after our group work in Greek mountains, we will move to Athens and join the World Beautiful Business Forum, which is bringing 750 change makers. Very much an aligned theme for their forum as well. Loads of inspirational speakers. So it will sort of, our journey will then sort of continue into being more inspired on how to perhaps tap into some of these challenges that we are exploring. And then the journey will continue online for a few months, where we'll focus more on the groups and the specific support the groups will require, until we meet again in Brazil for a retreat, 3-day retreat, to reflect on where the groups have gone to in their journey so far and what might they require now, and how do we ensure that everybody is successful in their endeavors, and what they sort of outline for themselves in the groups.
That sounds amazing.
I think it's going to be so beautiful. Like, I wish I could join myself as a participant as well, because the way it's being designed is just so considerate. It's not, we're not bringing a group together to let's like work hard to come up
Yeah.
with some solutions. We are saying actually we need to move away from that coloniality. We need to move towards a bit more regenerative approach in our solutions finding, which might mean that also we don't find any solutions and we just sit with the problem for longer. It's a very considerate, quite, I would say, regenerative approach into an inquiry that is invited to resolve in some tangible outcomes and solutions driving, but also holds space for more conversation, more reflection, more witnessing. And so the cohort that is forming is absolutely incredible. People come from all around the world already, and it's like a diversity of voices. There's private organizations, there is public institutions, academia, foundations, nonprofits, and even people that sit a bit outside of organizational context, but they're entrepreneurial in a sense of how they bridge different sectors or industries together.
Interesting.
So this is where we are sort of challenging ourselves to look at the technical term of the entrepreneur,
Yeah.
with a bit more fluidity, not only inside the institution, but also inside of the system. And when it specifically sort of works for this nexus, it's going to be really, really lovely. And we still have some spaces available, actually. So if people feel inspired and want to learn more and want to explore more about this, then I'm very happy to invite those conversations in. And not many spaces available, but there are some.
Amazing. And I will put then all the links in the show notes to make sure that people can check it out and learn even more about it or reach out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That would be great. And I think it kind of like, again, the thinking around the Action Fellowship loops back to our, opening statements around the village and the villagers. And it's really, that's where it really sits. And so then you don't know what happens in the village council, isn't it? It's kind of generative space, but the conditions and how they're being created. We have some really amazing facilitators here and designers of the journey who, it will be beautiful to be held within that container, and especially if one has really like intention to contribute to some solutions. I'm so careful when I say solutions. Maybe I need to find another word for that, because it's not solutions in a regular sense.
Yeah. No, I really love how almost it feels like you're how to say, like almost you're bringing that really deep respect for the topics that we're looking at and the people who are looking at it, because you'll be bringing together a lot of different humans from different backgrounds with different experience, different relation as well to the problems, to look at this big challenge that we're facing, climate equity and tech. In terms of the big ones that are out there, there are others, but at least in a business context, there are pretty meaty topics to look into. And I think when you consider these topics, it feels like almost the normalized way has been to, force it and push it and come up with a solution as fast as possible, irrelevant pretty much of how it's done, of the people thinking about it, of, whether how much it's going to be a long-term solution or not. It's like, let's get to the
Great
end.
impacts, right? Like,
Exactly, rather than actually really focusing on the process. And I love how the way you're organized as you've been sharing it, it feels like it's okay, let's slow down that train. Let's really appreciate what we are trying to deal with here and who is trying to look at it. Let's value that and give it that space, give it the environment, as you were saying, that's necessary to really approach those topics in a way that's different from what we've been doing, because if not, then it's pointless. Gonna come up with the same solution. So it's a lovely space that, as you were saying, you've created for really new possibilities to emerge on how we can approach those problems. It feels like from an organizational standpoint, from an individual standpoint, but also broader from a societal standpoint and across sectors, across industries, etc.
yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful team that has come together to and partners as well, and mentor. Like, it's a beautiful community, beautiful village actually, that we brought together to design this journey and to design it with a consideration
Yeah.
to, you know, the people that are affected by these themes, as well as the people and organizations who are driving some initiatives that are responding within the areas of these themes, I suppose. And so, yeah, like I shared in the beginning, like what we are often missing is the interconnectedness approach.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about climate change without talking about the people that it affects,
Yeah.
or talking about climate change solutions without talking about the people that it affects. And what is really important in systems change considerations is that we don't bring any more solutions that extract further from communities, that stand on someone else's human rights. We have to come up with solutions that do the opposite, that regenerate the communities, or at the very least, that don't affect them in a negative way. And so, I suppose that's what we are trying to bring into the conversation. How do we look at climate change and solutions for climate change that consider the people? Um, and how do we look at advancing technologies and also considering the people? It's a space that is sort of, we are kind of suggesting that we are bringing collective action together through this journey, but at the same time, we are being very careful not to jump into any collective action. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And I can imagine the value as well from an individual standpoint to go on that journey to experience a different way to looking at a problem in the environment that you're creating, the connection that that person will make. And that's before even coming up with possibilities, insights, solutions, and all that can be applied to the organizational contexts. It's very rich. Oh, lucky people who are going, and if there are a few spaces left, I really encourage people listening if they're interested to look into it.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Thank you so much for the support. It means a lot, for sure.
when does it start?
We're starting mid-April with the online prep journey, and then the first week of May is when we all meet in Greece. And Brazil will happen in end of October, so there's time for Brazil to plan for that.
Thank you, Jolana, for that overview of the program, of the league, of also who is an entrepreneur, what's the environment they need. So if someone cannot necessarily join the fellowship or doesn't have something that's already established in the organization, how can someone start becoming an entrepreneur?
Hmm. I love this question because I feel like it's the sort of notion of empowering everyone who works for an organization. Like, how can you do something that connects your work with a little bit of a deeper purpose, perhaps, and gives you a bit more substance? And I remember myself before I came to entrepreneurship, I so needed something like that in my life. And so this would really help me at that time. So I love this question. So I think first start with you. Start by deepening your perspective, your personal perspective. So go inside and what do you care about? Where does my fire come from? Where do I really light up? You know, or even when we look at the news and the geopolitical situation, what does really bother me? Like, what makes me really angry? What frustrates me? Explore that for yourself and really sit with that. What does that mean? Like, what can I do about that? You know, and sometimes these things that sit with us and that spark that fire might be really wide, like right out there, might be too abstract. So how do we then bring it like into something tangible and sit with that as well? Because if maybe you could succinct your what frustrates you in the world into human rights and equality, or you could really care about the environment, like and those principles then could be always drawn anywhere in any organizational context, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I would start with you. Then, as you deepen in your perspective, go into learning about the world and understand a little bit more what is happening out there, and that could be also in relation to your organization, perhaps. So what if you're working for a company? Where does that company operate? What do you know about that world? What do you know about those communities there? Like a little wider understanding about the world. I would then also invite people to explore more about regenerative principles. So I think even though, when the league initially started, we didn't speak explicitly about regenerative development. A lot of that, when you think of sort of the explanation of what an entrepreneur does and who they are, versus like what does a regenerative leader look like, is very much in alignment and sync, right? So I think regenerative principles could be like a nice way to explore how do we center life in our work and in our thinking, and then deepen your perspective around your business, the business that you work for, or if it's a public institution, whatever the institution. And then, as I was sharing, then sort of the triangle of, understanding the work, understanding the societal need, understanding myself, and that intersection, that is where you could start coming up with ideas and prototyping and testing them. Then I would say build your relational infrastructure. So really grow your network. So, get inspired by other people's work. go out to different events that are talking about where your passions are. So if you're interested about the environment, go out there and talk, go join join those biodiversity talks, join those climate conversations. Very important. It's just like a fuel into the dream world, really. And then join a community of practice. So that can be the League of Intrapreneurs, join one of our programs, or find another community of practice that really resonates with you. But just to be sort of with peers where you can talk about things and deliberate together, or start your own if there isn't one. Maybe start your own in your organization, even if you work for a large organization and you're really interested in how your organization could contribute to human rights or policies or climate change mitigation, then start those groups and have those conversations. And find allies at your work. It's really important, to find what commonalities you might have with the colleagues, whatever seniority or juniority level they might be in comparison to you. Both are needed. And then lastly, bridge your desire into tangible outcomes. And how do you do that? So I like the idea of imagining from regenerative practice. So like practicing imagination and being able to imagine what's the potential of our ideas, what's the potential of this fire that might be sparking inside of you. And then really feel like into what does it feel when that's true. Really kind of feel into that, and that get yourself all excited with that, because a journey of an intrapreneur is a long haul in many cases. It depends really on that relational infrastructure, how quickly you might be able to take something off the ground, unless you are the one that sits with the budgets, right? If you're the one that sits with the organizational budgets, then yes, then you can fly quickly. But having sort of resilience plan is important and can help you sustain yourself whilst you're developing your idea. And without sort of wanting to scare anyone away, some entrepreneurial initiatives took even 10 plus years to develop. So imagine like that you have this idea you sit with, and then 10 years later, that's when someone starts understanding. So what do you do in those 10 years, 10 long years, when you're trying to have these conversations and nobody is getting it? A lot of the time, this is about timing, the timing for the right thing, but also about the entrepreneurs sitting with it and sticking to it and not moving away from that idea. And keeping, until everybody knows that that's what you care about in your organization. And so when the time comes, that's when you're gonna hit the jackpot and be able to run with it. So in the meantime, test, and test again, to critically question your direction and prototype. And then once you've got something that you really know this can fly and this can make a difference and this can work for organization, especially if it can bring profits, but doesn't always have to. But think about those benefits for the organization for sure, because that's what we're trying to do here: help organizations to move towards more regenerative practices. And then talk about it as soon as you've got something solid, and just make sure you let everybody know, and create a business plan, and you're ready. What can really help with all of this is our Entrepreneur Compass and the book that we've co-written with our community.
That one.
Yes,
It's a brilliant one.
Thank you. So it's on our website in, I think, how to get involved. I think that page has like all the different research works that we've connected over the years, linked to our book, and also the compass. I think the compass is there for free. So you can download it. And the compass essentially is kind of taking the entrepreneur from the journey as I described it. Exactly, from the whole journey all the way to the end. And and it has a guide that kind of guides you through it as well. So that could be a nice way to support yourself as well. And I have an idea. Why don't we give anyone who listens to this podcast, we can give the free e-version of that book that you've just showed to everybody, so people
Very
can
good
read it,
idea.
because it has a lot of case studies of entrepreneurs in action. It can really inspire.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I love what you've been sharing around really tangible. What can I do? What can I start? And I think some threads that I could see through that journey was around a lot around curiosity.
Hmm.
There was a lot of curiosity for yourself, for the organization, for the global context, for the thing that you're really passionate about, interconnection between people, between ideas, between maybe groups that might seem not necessarily related. And also, what I've heard quite a lot was that imagination, which I really love, which needs space and time. But it's so important. I think you're right. We can so easily go down, that's what has been done, and therefore that's what I'm going to keep doing. And actually, there is a lot of freedom in that exploration that we can take, and I think that's necessary. And the last one that I've learned that I think it's also really keep a regenerative principle is around potential, around looking at potential instead of problems. And that's quite of a big shift. We're so used to looking at problems instead of looking at potential that can be realized. But I find also that lens very positive when you go through that journey to keep that in mind. What's the potential here for that problem or for that intersection, that company, that community?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this on regenerative development principles, that it's really centered around the potential. And I do feel that it's important that we can understand the problems or the challenges that we are facing,
Um,
and questioning them with what's the potential here,
yeah,
so that we can shift from that sort of one way of looking at it and expand our mind into looking at, yeah, um what can sprout here, what can germinate here.
yeah, completely. Amazing. Good. So before I let you go, Jolana,
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask you a last question that I've asked my guests at the end of the podcast. If you had three wishes, you had a magic lamp, like one of those genies, what would you wish for?
Hmm. I would wish that we can find a society, as the global village, that we can find empathy for each other, that we can again, well, maybe not again, but that we can build trust amongst each other and within the system that we live, and that we all live in the lived experience of abundance.
Hmm, that sounds amazing. So where with more empathy, more trust, and in the lived experience of abundance.
Mm, yes. What a nice question. Three wishes. Oh, you just brought me into like really imagining what that would look like. I love it.
Good, that's part also of the regenerative path, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I wish that for us, and I think globally, but also for business, it would be a beautiful lens to add, I think, and to take how we do business to another level, to evolve it.
I agree. I was just thinking, like, what would capitalism look like if competition moved to abundance mindset, competition mindset to abundance mindset?
Yeah. I think that's one of the questions we need to sit with.
How fun, hey?
It would. I agree. 100% agree. Good. Thank you so much, Jolana. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for all that you shared with us, your experience, but also your wisdom. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm sure people listening will also really benefit from it. So thank you for spending all that time with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was real fun, going all wild with the thoughts. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for the invitation. Love it, and can't wait to hear how others um, sort of feel about these themes that we have woven here together, and learning from others' perspectives as well. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and have a lovely end of your week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Futuring Lab podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform and to share it. Share it with those who you think might want to learn to future with us. Thank you. Bye.